So we're confident in our outcome.
Let's dig into this a little bit then. Obviously, we can go back and forth if we need to, but like, what's the process? Brand comes to you, let's say it's Focus, brand new bike.
Mm-hmm.
Here it is, MBUK team. What happens? How do you go about analysing it, putting together your review, and then publishing it? So let's go through that whole process.
Okay, if you want the whole thing, normally there's some kind of launch.
Yes.
So it's like a launch activity.
Which would be a press camp,
Yeah.
a trip, something like that.
Yeah.
We're riding through meadows holding hands, like it'd be unreal.
Ticks everywhere.
Exactly.
He's already on there. I'm there as well.
Yeah.
We ride round, we do,
And the brand is trying to...
They're trying to give you a good experience.
Good experience,
Yeah, totally. And, you know, they'll be smart about it. And if they know that there's any weaknesses, they'll try to steer you onto the better trails to suit whatever product that might be.
Mm-hmm.
You're in the fast group. Let's be honest. You're in the fast
Do you
group.
know what? Like, everyone's really fast now.
Really?
Yeah, it's pretty pinned. And to be fair, I'm traveling loads less now. So I don't...
Yeah.
Pre-COVID, we were away all the time. It was kind of just the way everything operated. Now, things have changed a little bit. For the better, I'd say.
Okay.
So yeah, normally you'd go on a press trip, and off the back of the press trip, at most you do a first ride review. But you know, they're kind of just ride impressions, and you need to kind of factor in you're riding on trails you don't know, on a bike you've never ridden.
And you've been presented what the brand wants you to think about.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, for sure. And to a degree, you know, some of these are like proper whirlwind things. You might have like left your house at 3 a.m. and you're there having hardly slept, and you know you're already like in a presentation, then straight out on the trails, and then you're packing up and shipping out at the end of the day. So you can't, I don't think you can put too much weight in those things, but we will always do a news story off the back of it. So it isn't ever like a straight up press release. It is our take on what's been presented. And then, the goal for us is to always get that bike or that product on our home trails. Right. Ideally, we'll have whatever it might be a few months in advance.
How far in advance are press camps normally? For let's say there's a new bike coming out. Are you 6 months before?
No. So for example, I've got one coming up at the end of the month. Yeah. And that is, so by the time I get back, there'll be less than a month till that goes live.
Oh wow!
But you know, sometimes like I've been on ones, say pre-Eurobike, when Eurobike used to be in September. I've been on one pre-Eurobike where the brand has just gone, actually, you know what? Because it's going to get lost in the news cycle at Eurobike. There's no embargo. And so for us, Google, you know, being top of Google counts, really makes a difference. Yeah. So then you finish your ride, you miss dinner, and you just work. You work through till it's uploaded at 2 a.m., whatever it is, and then get out of the door. You know, back in the day when that was becoming more important, the Google stuff, it got to a point where brands just never put embargoes on anything, and we'd fly, like we used to go to Specialized, you do the huge camps with road and mountain, and then I think they'd basically like hire a resort for like 2 weeks. They'd have all their biggest dealers come over, and you'd be part of the first wave. And there was one time, I think, me and Warren, who heads up the road stuff, we flew in, and they present the entire range. Okay. We did all the presentations in the day, and then just wrote. Went out, took all the photos, and then just wrote. And I think I was up for 36 hours. Just getting stuff done. And they're like, why aren't you coming on the ride? You're like, because we've got to do this. Yeah. It's changed a bit now. It's way better. Right. But there's not always a ton of time. But ideally, if you can get a product like 3 months in advance, you can get a decent handle on how it performs. We're never going to be able to comment on longevity over 18 months. We're never going to ride something for 18 months simply because, well, I mean, I guess we do with our long-term bikes. We'll switch like drivetrains over and stuff like that. But it's important to try and get those reviews out and get that buying advice out in a decent sort of amount of time. Got you. So it's really hard to say something after 2 years is going to still be working well, because we just can't do that. But yeah, a few months and we'll get a good handle on it. And then, so yeah, once the product's with us, the idea is that we try to back it. Okay. Because that's the easiest way to try and extract decent info. I think, I'm sure, you know, anyone who rides bikes and they change a product on their bike or they change their bike will adapt. And as soon as you adapt, you start kind of all that stuff that you're trying to retain just goes out the window.
Okay.
Any of that information. So the first few rides really, I think, are so valuable. You're not going to get everything out of it. You're not going to be able to take it to enough places or push it maybe as hard as it needs to be pushed to have like a final opinion. But being able to do it and ride with another bike or another product that's similar.
Okay.
Enables you to really get a good handle on it, and it's even better if you know that other product really well.
Okay.
Or if it's an updated version, you ride on the previous version,
Right.
and then you just keep as many of those, as many as the variables consistent as possible. So if you're testing wheels, you change tires, make sure the tires are the same, cassette's the same, everything's the same bike, all of those things, pressures, limiting variables, all of that, and then you ride. You basically have to just ride the same tracks.
Okay.
Ride the same tracks, and there's no reason why you can't go off and do other bits and pieces, but to make it efficient and to make it work, you kind of have to have a process in place, and all of us will probably have a slightly different process. But when we're doing Bike of the Year, for example, I'll go and do a few days in this one location, which I know is easy to repeat, has certain things that I'm looking for out of certain bikes.
Yeah.
Then I go to a different location, which offers something slightly different.
Okay.
And you kind of make your notes there, and you tend to end up making setup changes, and then you go to another place.
Do you literally make notes as well? Are you like a
making notes constantly.
writer?
Yeah,
Typer, phone thing?
I just have my phone.
Okay.
Especially like this winter, it's been so wet. So like,
you're not carrying paper around.
or like I don't know, my laptop's hanging, but you just try and keep it as simple as possible. So you're just getting notes, making notes, and just, I guess like I'll also have initial setup, location, and then kind of what I'm feeling from that day, and then have the bikes that I'm riding. And then the other thing is like you're always trying to, say it's enduro bikes. I don't really time stuff as much anymore, but I used to time quite a lot of stuff. And I'd take one bike that might felt, I don't know, it would beat you up, but you could ride fast, or you had a fast time. But you'd take that bike and you'd ride it at the start of the day one day, or on the next day you'd ride it at the end of the day to see how the effects it would have on your arms, your legs, if it would add fatigue, stuff like that. Because it might be that, in fact, the comfier bike that doesn't maybe feel as fast, but you can ride it faster at the end of a long day riding, which is what you'd have if you're racing enduro, right?
Yeah, it's interesting.
So if you got like a firm bike, I think that was the big thing when loads of downhill racers came into enduro, and they realised pretty quick, because the whole mentality about just muscling a downhill bike down the hill, and was just like, that's what we train for. It was like 3-4 minutes of being really strong, and if you have to have a really firm setup to go fast, that's what you do.
Yeah.
Whereas enduros, you're trying to survive and eke out every bit of time you can. But if it's great if you win the first stage, but if you can't hold on by the time you're on stage 5 or 6, what's the point? So you have to bring in this sort of level of comfort, and that's a big thing that we've seen over the years, is like the change in suspension tunes, how much better the tyre tech's got, all of those sorts of things, and it's certainly something that we look for.
Okay.
I mean, after riding so many bikes and so many components, how much can you predict what a bike's going to be like just from the spec list and geometry alone?
I guess to a degree, I won't look. Well, you can't.
Not before you ride it?
It depends. Sometimes you have to have a good handle on it. If you're getting bikes in for a test with a price bracket, you kind of need to know what it costs and what's coming. But I won't necessarily spend too long going over something like a geometry chart, unless there's something. If I know that they haven't changed the geometry and I know I need a medium, I get a medium. If stuff is radically different and maybe I need to downsize or upsize, then I'll spend a bit longer looking. But I try to go into it with no real preconceptions.
Interesting.
Because that's the whole part of it, is just trying to be as open-minded as possible.
Yeah, there you go.
Because I think, you look at these things and they're amazing. They're beautiful bits of kit. And if you're a fan of you can be a fan of the brand, you can be into stuff, but you don't want to let any of those biases creep in.
Yeah.
You really have to try and be as open-minded as possible. So I think sorry, I probably haven't really answered your question, but yeah, I guess to a degree you could look at stuff and you could go, right, well, I know, they haven't updated that and I know exactly how that drivetrain rides, or I know I've seen that fork and it's on that bike and I know exactly the settings I'm going to need and I know the volume spaces I'll need within that. But then you got to remember, like, with components especially, because the whole thing is one big cohesive machine, just because a fork behaves like that on one bike, if it's at a slightly different angle, like a different head angle, or you've got even stuff like different stem length, so you're going to weight it differently, different reach, you may need to change your fork settings just because of that.
No, it's really, actually not the answer I expected. I expected you to say, I get bike through, I look at the geometry chart and I already know what it's going to... But that's actually not testing. That's, like you say, that's just being biased. And you're not an armchair bike designer. There's no point in having like this, like a 65-degree head angle is really the absolute minimum of what I would really... Like, you have to try it to know, don't you? Because there's...
Yeah, and there's definitely like a window within stuff like angles and reaches and those measurements. There's definitely windows within how that will perform and how that will perform better or worse. So you kind of can, but you shouldn't, I suppose is what I'm trying to say. You kind of can, you make a judgment, but we really shouldn't be doing that. It kind of is down to time on the trail. And some brands will be pretty canny with how they spend their money as well. Yeah. And a lot of people, there was definitely a trend back in, 10, 15 years ago. Brands would create that perceived value by sticking like an expensive rear derailleur on. Right. And be like, oh yeah, but it's got this. And you'd be like, okay, that's great, but I'm going to smash it off. So don't really care. Spend the money on better tyres, spend the money on better suspension. And we're kind of at that point now where the differences are smaller, where, on the geometry chart, like the bike tests I've just done, because we measure everything, we don't just go by geometry charts. Okay. Because geometry charts are generally done off drawings. Yeah. And drawings are done by, Maxis give a measurement of a tyre. That might not be accurate in the real world situation.
And the same with bike geometry, so you'll measure everything yourself.
And if they're welding a bike, there's always going to be a tolerance.
Yeah.
So we measure it all, and you're talking like, we've got head angles that vary by 0.3 of a degree. Yeah. Reaches that vary by like a millimetre. So you're like, well, they're going to feel the same. But the reality is they don't.
No, and also you've got, there are actually so many variables. Like I remember doing a frame and spec'd the head angle, and then the maker did the head angle with sag. Right. So then, do you know what I mean?
Yeah,
so like they did the correct head angle, but they did it once the fork was sitting in sag, because that was their view.
Like their dynamic. They want the dynamic geometry.
Yeah, but it was a hardtail, so then that meant So we had this sample, and we're like, why is it? It feels
different to what you kind of thought.
Yeah. You know what I mean? And then you measure it, and you're like, oh. And I imagine that happens over and over again, because within the... I can't remember who... there was a really good podcast about, like, design is one thing. I think it was Elon Musk. Okay. He was talking about
quite smart
art of design, but then also manufacture is so much of a skill and so difficult that it's like...
So you're saying like it's the hardest part.
Manufacture
of it and keeping it consistent.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And we're talking about like literally a load of poles welded together, and it's still difficult. He's talking about electric cars.
Hey man, what an episode that was. You did amazing in it.
And so did you.
You shone like a star.
You shone like a moon.
I shone like a Focus spring deal.
Oh,
that's
beautiful
good.
transition.
Right, I've got a question for you, David, to kick this final advert off.
Yeah.
What would you do with up to €400 if you got it back when buying a bike?
Ooh, I could stay in the bike shop and spend my €400 on accessories.
Good point. Support your local bike shop. Great point.
I could take the €400 and go to another shop close by, maybe buy €400 of pasta, maybe go to the Euro store, get €400 and just... That's Christmas done for eternity.
True.
Just keep handing them out
Lottery
every year.
tickets.
Yeah, beans.
Tyres.
Chamois
cream.
A new pet.
A new pet. Perhaps a water dragon or an iguana. Lovely idea. Well, Focus are actually making that question a reality.
Nice.
Because with the Focus spring deals, you can grab up to €400 back when buying a new bike. If you want to find out more, check out the terms and conditions and all of the details in the link. We're going to put that below, and I'm also going to read it out.
Please.
Okay, you ready for me to read it out?
Yes, I'm.
This is old school, innit? Reading out links.
Yeah, anticipation.
I'm going to do it anyway.
Please do it.
I'm doing it.
I want the deal.
Ride.focus.bikes/spring deals TRC.
Ooh, nice. So that is ride.focus.bikes/spring deals TRC. And let us know in the comments what you would do with €400. Best answer wins a signed ODub hat.
Oh, I like it. Good.
All right.
I've got hats. Yeah, I'm ready. Yeah, I'm good
Okay,
for that.
okay.
Hey, can we also put something up here that you can click on for the next episode?
How about we put a subscribe up there in the middle?
Yeah, love
We're going to put a video we think that our lovely companionship will love on your face.
On my face?
Yeah.
So
And
they
on
can't see me now?
Gone. And on my face, another video that we think people will love. And thank you for watching. Thank you for listening. Please hit like and subscribe. You guys are the best.
Peace and love.